Okay, here I am again. I've been getting the guidance months ago to express myself more and to be consistent with such expressions, and this and that happened, and I wasn't able to follow through with it. So I'm holding the intention again to do so because the things that have been happening in my personal life feel very valuable. They feel so valuable that it's like this cutting edge experience on the tipping point of relational evolution, and it's it's alive. It's happening in the moment. It's coming forth through those relationships and the communications around things that arise between people involved. And something I want to talk about today is false harmony. And this has really been coming forward when I'm witnessing various levels of integrity and authenticity and lack of integrity and inauthenticity. And there's a lot of words that we can say, but really what matters is how we follow through with the actions and how we live our lives. And I've been witnessing multiple scenarios where there's this idea of harmony from a wounded place of keeping the peace and remaining quiet and accumulating judgments through the lens of internal conflict that is projected onto the external world. And I believe that everyone's had this experience when you say something or someone says something about a person, and then depending on what company there is, that expression changes. It's a conditional expression. It's coming from a place of what do I have to do and say to be accepted and received, or what am I not allowed to do and say to be accepted and received, and the ways that we can accumulate different biases from those acceptances being perceived through the lens of a wound, through the lens of if I don't do a certain thing or say a certain thing, that I won't be loved, or that love will be taken away from me, or I'll be exiled and ostracized. That's a really big one that's been coming up for me, is just this remembrance of so many past lives of being exiled and even killed as a powerful person, as a witch, as a person that challenges other people and disrupts their reality, which is still happening in my present day, except I'm not getting killed for it. But there's still this experience of the wound that came up yesterday that I was alchemizing and transmuting. Was it would just be easier if I wasn't around. The story is another person's emotional responsibility is another person's emotional experience is my responsibility. So that wound comes from being very little, having things projected onto me, and being told that it was my fault, and being told that there was something wrong with me, as a defense mechanism and a strategy of that other person unable or unwilling to actually face the pain that's within. And the pain becomes so great, it just boils over and then spits fire at other people in the external reality, because the internal reality is so fragmented and so fractured with internal conflict and confusion, and the soul leaves the body, and there's no consciousness in those moments. And so I'm getting this really beautiful opportunity continuously in my life to resolve this wound. And the pattern has been to collapse and to take it on and to believe, oh, right, okay, there must be something that I did wrong, or I'm causing this. Even though deep down I know that I'm not causing it and that there's nothing wrong with me, it triggers that part that's still not resolved, and it magnetizes those situations with other people that have those complementary traumas to resolve them together, if the people have willingness. That's required. Otherwise, it will play out regardless, conscious or unconscious, it will still play out. But these wounds that are wanting to be resolved within me and within the collective consciousness are revolving around, is it safe to be me? I need to know that it's safe to be me. I want to be celebrated and encouraged for being me. I want my unique expression to be honored and valued and respected exactly as it is, without being changed or conditioned or limited or controlled. And that's a really powerful invocation, because these traumas and these wounds can become so embedded and integrated into our identities and our frameworks of our reality that it's hard to even know the difference sometimes in what is real and what is not real, especially since everyone's looking through the perception of their own wounds and their own reality. And so it's high-level emotional evolutionary work. And there are different experiences, different levels of those experiences that we're going to come in contact with, various degrees of people on their path and their evolutionary journey. And I'm learning specifically through my own transmissions about sacred rage and anger still. Because for me, when I magnetize and I attract these experiences of this, it could be perceived as a victim consciousness, right? Because when I was in a really innocent space when I was a young girl, there was not an opportunity for me to stand up for myself in such a degree where I wasn't afraid in very real survival ways to be harmed for doing that. And that's also in my body and in my bones through past life experiences. But now that I'm an adult, I do have the experience and the power and the ability to actually create boundaries and to stand up for myself when things are being projected, and also taking responsibility and accountability for my part, and the ways that I co-create that by expecting attack, or criticism, and being in a defensive state. And so there's all of these beautiful shadows that want to come to the light and want to resolve our deepest truths and bring us into a state of our being where we are aligned and we are in our sovereignty and our gifts are acknowledged and honored internally. Therefore, other people acknowledge and respect and recognize us through the highest of our expression and don't identify us by the pains, the wounds, the traumas, the shortcomings, the reactivity. So the truth that is really coming forth in this moment is to allow authentic expression and to allow the emotions to come forth without fear. Because I had been stating a boundary of what I am and am not available for, and one of my statements that I've gotten to express recently is I am not available to receive verbal abuse. And that's a lot for me to say, for me to speak that after receiving verbal abuse most of my life, but also just agreeing to take on that karmic weight of many generations of emotional, physical, verbal abuse and manipulation. This is one of the things that my soul has agreed to resolve and alchemize in this lifetime. And so to speak that in itself was confronting, and to create that boundary. And what happened in my experience is that boundary was not respected. And so yesterday I allowed my anger. I allowed myself to create a boundary with a scream. And I realized that within my own being, as a feminine, embodied woman in this time, that same action hundreds of years ago could get me killed. Could put me in an insane asylum in the current day if I'm in certain circumstances and environments that don't understand emotional expression and wrong it and shame it as a society at large, or try to medicate people for their emotions, for having their real, raw, authentic expressions in their emotions. And what actually happened is that after I screamed, I felt so much better, and I realized I took all of that projected energy, all of that spitfire that was in the environment and in my external surroundings, took it into my body, and then discharged it and released it through that channel. And then I was no longer in conflict. The attacks stopped, and I made that boundary. And you know, that's not something I've really let myself do in this life, to allow my anger to feel safe in my anger without any stories of being too much or overreacting or being crazy or whatever those projected wounds are that we've been fed, that we've been conditioned and programmed and taught from people that were not ready or didn't have the tools to experience their own trauma processing, to then project it onto the external reality and gaslight innocent beings in their developmental years that it's their fault and that something is wrong with them, until we mature enough to process those deep interworkings of the neural pathways and the nervous system. Until we come face to face with another person in the adult body that has that primal, animalistic, juvenile part that just needs to be seen, acknowledged, and loved. And it could even be pre-verbal. It could even be trauma from before we were even able to speak, or even before we were able to come into this physical form. It is possible to experience trauma while still in the womb. And we come in with these things. We all have things that we have come in with, that we have agreed to transmute. In ideal realities and situations, we have the tools and the experiences and the expressions to be able to work through these things, to be able to surround ourselves with other conscious beings that have our best interest in heart and that have the purity of intention to bring us back to our truth and back to our soul and into our sovereignty by reminding us these things. It's a really powerful full moon. There's a lot coming up in the fiery and the watery realms, and where those two elements collide. So thank you for tuning in. I would love to hear how this relates to your personal experience, personal process, anything that has come up for you in receiving this. And my intention is that the medicine of my experience and my expression of my experience can open up new pathways in the consciousness of all beings that are willing and ready to receive these codes of emotional development that we are harvesting in the present moment as the new earth comes to being. Mahalo.